Assalamu alaikum everyone, I am Mr. Hussain, MEL consultant at PMCC Gilgit-Baltistan. Welcome to this tutorial on need assessment in monitoring and evaluation. Have you ever known, just in your gut, that your community desperately needed something, but when you went to ask for resources you were told you needed documentation first? It can be incredibly frustrating. Well, in this explainer, we're going to fix that. We're going to understand what a need assessment is, why it's so important in MEL, and how it helps in designing effective development projects. We are going to transform those gut feelings into hard, undeniable data. Let's dive right in.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We will be covering defining a need, looking at deductive versus inductive approaches, gathering the data, calculating the need index, and finally, applying the results.
All right, Section 1, defining a need.
Before we can measure anything for our projects, we need to know exactly what we're looking for, right? So what is a need? It's simply the difference, the gap between an existing condition and a desired condition. Think about a low-income family. The existing condition might be an income so low that they can't secure adequate shelter or nutrition. The desired condition? Having that safe shelter and good food. The gap between those two realities? Well, that is the need. It's not just a vague feeling, it's a quantifiable discrepancy that we can actually measure.
Now, when we take the time to properly document that gap, some pretty amazing things happen to our project planning. A solid needs assessment does a lot of heavy lifting for us. It helps determine community opinion, sets our priorities, and actually measures the exact size of the need. But you know what else? It gathers ideas for methods to meet those needs and naturally builds community participation. When you sit down, ask people what they need, and genuinely listen, they become invested in the solution. You're basically turning their desires into a factual, constructive baseline for action.
Okay, let's move on to Section 2, deductive versus inductive approaches.
Before we hand out a single survey in the field, we've got to decide how to structure our assessment. It's kind of fascinating how these two foundational frameworks look at the problem from completely opposite directions. The deductive approach starts by asking, what goals do we want, and then looks at where we currently are in relation to them. The inductive approach totally flips that. It starts by asking the community, where are we now, and uses those actual ground conditions to figure out what our goals should be.
Let's break down the deductive approach first. It's a very direct path. Step 1, you list and rank your goals. Sometimes we might use a pre-published set of standard goals for health or education. Step 2, determine the existing conditions. Where are we right now? Step 3, identify the gaps. This is your discrepancy analysis. And Step 4, document your priorities based on those gaps. The big advantage here is that it's a straight line. The downside, well, if you just use standardized goals right out of the gate, you might completely miss a crucial, specific need of the local community.
Now contrast that with the inductive approach. Here, Step 1 is all about describing the actual current conditions right there on the ground. Step 2 checks the status of any previous goals you might have had. Step 3 identifies the discrepancies, and then Step 4 assigns priorities to determine new goals based on the reality you just found. By discovering the actual conditions first, the goals you eventually set might end up being way more realistic and comprehensive for the specific community you're working with.
Moving right along. Section 3, gathering the data.
Once we've nailed down our framework, it is time to hit the field. Generally, you've got two main ways to collect this information: written questionnaires or in-person interviews. Questionnaires are great for gathering quantitative data quickly, for sure, but look at the incredible advantages of doing interviews. The interviewer can collect so much extra data through casual comments. Plus, literacy isn't required to participate, which is absolutely huge for us in rural development. It allows for on-the-spot interpretation if folks speak a different local language. You get a much higher response rate than mailing forms, and it's highly personal. The community feels truly involved. Yes, hiring and training interviewers costs time and money, but man, the richness of the data usually makes it the superior choice.
Let's look at this brilliant little sample format, which you can use on paper or in a field interview. Notice how it asks about a category, like class size. It doesn't just ask if it's a problem. No, it forces the respondent to rate two entirely separate things on a scale of 1 to 4. First, their view of the present condition, and second, their view of the need or desired condition. Having them rate these side by side, that is the secret engine of a great needs assessment. It gives us the exact two numbers we need to calculate that gap we talked about earlier.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 4, calculating the need index. All right, this is the analytical deep dive where we turn those subjective feelings into hard, actionable M&E data. The math here is beautifully simple but literally a game changer. Need score minus present condition score equals the need index. You just take the average score given to the desired condition and you subtract the average score given to the existing condition. That resulting difference? That's your need index. It mathematically quantifies the community's perceived gap.
Let's run through a concrete calculation using the exact example from our source material. Imagine a community rating class size. On average, they rate the present condition as a 1, meaning the current setup is not very strong or pretty poor. But they rate the need for improvement as a 4, very strong. 4 minus 1 equals 3. Boom! Class size gets a need index of 3.
Of course, to get those nice, neat average numbers, you've got to meticulously summarize your raw data first. This breakdown shows you exactly how that works. You can see how the responses for class size are tallied up, how many folks voted for option 1, option 2, and so on, right alongside the percentages. You have to calculate the average score for that present conditions column and the average for the needs column across all your respondents before doing the final subtraction. It's a bit of number crunching, yeah, but it absolutely ensures your final index is a true objective representation of the community's collective voice.
Once you've got the need index calculated for every single issue, you can build tables just like these. You rank them from largest to smallest. The issues with the highest index represent the most intensely felt needs in the community. What's also incredibly powerful is breaking these numbers down by demographics. In this specific source's case, they broke it down by Native American blood quantum, but in your projects it could be by age, gender, or geographic region. This shows you instantly if one particular subgroup has a drastically different priority than everybody else. Presenting your data this way gives everyone a factual, objective starting point for deciding where those limited resources actually need to go.
And finally, Section 5, Applying the Results.
Finding the gaps is really only useful if it actually leads to real development interventions. But as you transition to implementation, you're going to face some real-world obstacles. You might face internal pushback, like a desire to keep opinions hidden just to avoid disagreements over priorities. You'll absolutely face the reality of limited funding. You might know exactly what the biggest need is, but you still have to figure out what you can realistically afford to do. You also have to watch out for the risk of cultural bias if you're using standardized goals, and of course, you have to justify the expense of hiring interviewers in the first place. These are just practical challenges every single meal practitioner has to manage.
Ultimately, your needs assessment feeds directly into what we call the implementation loop. You take those documented needs and use them to 1. Generate specific project objectives. 2. Analyze alternative solutions to meet those objectives. 3. Allocate your resources to the best plan. 4. Evaluate how effective that solution actually was. And 5. Recycle, meaning you establish new goals by starting the assessment process all over again. It is a continuous, evidence-based blueprint for community development.
We've seen exactly how to turn a vague sense of a problem into a documented, mathematical need index that demands action. By structuring your approach and asking the right questions, you take the guesswork completely out of development. So I'll leave you with this to think about. How will you ensure your next project is driven by documented needs rather than just well-intentioned assumptions? Thank you for watching this tutorial on need assessment in monitoring and evaluation. I hope this session helped you understand the importance of evidence-based planning in development projects. Please like, share, and subscribe for more educational content on MEL and project management. Khuda Hafiz.